All right, you are live.
Good morning, everybody. This is the Thursday, April 11th, 2024 regular meeting of the Financial Advisory Commission. In terms of who is present from the commission, it's me, Fred Sussman, Chair, Jim Cardillo, Vice Chair, Patrick Bannon, uh, Perry Hepworth, and Frank Brown. Ed Meehan indicated that he likely will not be here, that he has a work commitment that unavoidable. We also have from the city, Mike Maladoff, City Manager, Jody Dickinson, Finance Director, uh, Victoria Buckland, Assistant City Manager, and Kim Moronsky from the Finance Department. So, welcome everybody. I hope you all have been well since our last meeting. And the primary focus of today's meeting is going to be the FY 2025 budget. We're going to have a presentation in a few minutes from Jody about the budget. I forwarded a few minutes ago to fact members last year's report to the city council, as well as this year's budget instructions, which we all received a number of months ago, just so you would have that at ready disposal if you need it or want to look at it. I see that Jody sent out a few minutes ago her PowerPoint presentation and a debt capacity update from the city's financial advisors. And I believe we also received yesterday the various pieces of legislation and the budget materials from the city council. So those are my introductory remarks. I sent out an agenda last Friday. You all had an opportunity to review the agenda. Any revisions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Motion made by Jim Cardillo, seconded by Frank Brown.
Thank you.
All any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raising your right hand. Opposed? The agenda is approved. And I would note for the record that Katie Connolly from the Finance Department just joined us. I sent out minutes from our last meeting on March 14th, 2024. Kim, thanks for doing those minutes. Any revisions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing or hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Motion made by Perry Hepworth, seconded by Frank Brown. Any comments? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. It looks like it's unanimous. Minutes are approved.
Thank you.
Go to three reports. First, Finance Department. Jody, any report from the Finance Department aside from budget related, which we'll get to in a few minutes?
Let's see. I really wasn't thinking about this part of the presentation. Yeah, we've been really busy with budget, Katie and I and Capri and others along with us trying to get the budget book out, the legislation. We finally got to that on Monday, thanks to Katie and Capri did a lot of the work with pulling that together. We spent a lot of time working on that project, weekends, evenings. So kudos to everybody. As far as the finance department is concerned, the only thing that I would mention besides that is our continual vacancies. We have 2 accountants and a senior accountant position open right now, as well as one of our billing clerks over on the utility billing side. So I'm trying to get those filled. And I'm also working on trying to get somebody in contractually to help us out, because it always seems like we're down staff. So we thought it would get it'd be a good idea to have an extra body in there to help us when we have these vacancies. So besides that, the ACFR is out, as you know. We did a presentation on that. What am I forgetting? So busy, so busy. Other than that, just trying to catch up with the other things on my to-do list. So hopefully I'll be able to get back to that soon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jody. Any questions for Jody? Seeing and hearing none. Next, city manager, Mike, any report from city manager's office other than budget related?
Sure. The only thing that I'd like to mention is the leadership team met 2 weeks ago in response to the council leadership team goal setting, and we were meeting on implementation strategy. And I wanted to bring that in the context of this budget process, because that's something over the last year or two that we've been doing a little bit differently with council retreats, leadership retreats. I think Ross has talked a little bit about it, and Vicky. And the latest one was a couple of weeks ago where we were able to take the joint goal setting and put them into various implementation strategies that we think are reflected in the budget. One being the central services department that Jody may be alluding to later on. So otherwise, everything is moving along swimmingly. I do want to point out to the fact that the city is starting to get a lot of pressure on the housing authority and their financial issues. And it's something to put on your radar screen, because they're they are asking directly for subsidies for their operating budget from the city. And these issues will be coming up before the mayor and council in the not too distant future, I am sure.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? Seeing and hearing none, move on to audit committee. Jim, anything from the audit committee this month?
Since our last FAC meeting, the audit committee has had 2 meetings. There was a February 20 meeting and a March 18 meeting. There were topics discussed at the February 20 and March 18 meetings with regards to the city's implementation of performance measures, which is an ongoing project. There was a multi-meeting discussion with regard to the Art and Public Places Commission, and just for the audit committee to understand what are the procedures in place for art and public places in terms of how they receive funds and disperse funds. And we are awaiting a final report from that commission to deem it appropriate or inappropriate. The March 18 meeting included the presentation from UHY, the city's auditors. Objectively, the report was unmodified opinion. Subjectively, it was an extremely wonderful report. There were a couple of recommendations from the previous fiscal year that were implemented in the current year, and there were no recommendations. So kudos to Jody and her team again, as we've said during the audit committee meeting. The audit committee does have vacancies. I've been working on vacancies with the chair of the audit committee, and we hope to have those resolved soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for your work on the audit committee.
Happy to serve.
Any questions for Jim or comments? Seeing none, let's move on to the main topic for today, which is the FY 2025 budget presentation from Jody. Jody, thank you very much for giving us this in advance of your meeting this afternoon and presentation to the City Council. It is very, very much appreciated by the FAC. So thank you, and look forward to your presentation here. Jody, I quickly skimmed this before the meeting, so I have a very broad idea of what's in here. But 2 things that perhaps at some point in time during your presentation you can talk about is structural deficit, where we are with that, and how this budget proposes to address it, if it does. And that's the one thing for right now. There may be another one I'll mention later. So with that, let me turn it over to you, and let's look forward to your budget presentation. Jody, you're muted.
Sorry, I had lost the location of my mute button because I changed my presentation mode. And now, hold on. Now, can you see the presentation, the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I have it on my other screen. I was trying to figure out how to maximize it, but it's not, I don't know how to make it bigger. So hopefully it's visible and you'll be able to read the numbers. Welcome. I'm Jody Dickinson. I'm the finance director for the city of Annapolis. Glad to bring you this presentation of the mayor's fiscal year proposed 2025 budget. Start out, I wanted to, I think, city manager want to say a few words before I got started with my slides.
No, I mean, I had alluded to it earlier, and there's more of the same that I'm going to talk to the council, but I just want to underscore what Ross, I'm sure, has said before, and Vicky, that we've had a very participatory process the last year or two, engaging the council and mayor early and often, and the leadership team. So I hope this budget reflects that, and I'll peel off from here. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I wanted to start out with my acknowledgements. This is quite an effort every year. As I said earlier, we have a great staff, and there are others on the management team that spend a lot of time going through the departmental requests, pulling the information together and making final decisions. And I want to acknowledge the city manager and the assistant city manager sat in on most of the meetings that we had. And then primarily Katie, the budget manager, and Capri, our analyst, who worked hours and hours with the departments, helping them with getting their information into our budget system, OpenGov, and getting that information put into the form that can feed into a budget book. And this includes both our operating budget and our capital improvement plan. Both are very significant endeavors. So again, thank you to them. The DPW engineers and the leadership there, and the planning and zoning staff also spend an awful lot of time on the projects and putting together cost estimates and helping us decide what the priorities are. And then we have assistance every year with the Office of Law, the clerk's office, Cynthia Reuter. She's the legislative and policy analyst and helps pull together the legislation. And some of the work on the ordinance and the resolutions is mainly handled by her. We have, in the emails that you received, there are several budget documents, and I'll just run through them quickly. The main part of the budget, of course, is the legislation. We're preparing this to go to council to get a vote. It includes a budget ordinance, which includes the appropriation authority for all departments and funds, and it has a few appendices that give you breakdown to show the components of what's in the ordinance. There is a fees resolution that is introduced every year that sets the fees throughout all departments, throughout all code sections for the next fiscal year. And within that fees resolution are several increases this year. So I think the FAC will take a look at that and give your input on the fees. On the fines resolution, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that we've had any changes to the fines this year. Possibly one. Katie?
Correct.
Okay. One or none?
There's a small change in there.
Okay. All right. So then the third resolution is what we call the pay plan. It sets up the description of the positions, their grades, and then it attaches the pay scales for our employee groups. And as I'll mention in a few minutes, we don't have any of the union agreements finalized yet. We're working with all 4 of our groups and are working with various pay scale recommendations and so those aren't final, so we could not include those in the budget documents. So the pay plan right now has a placeholder for the unions with their current pay scale. And then as we finalize with the unions, we'll put forth amendments for council to insert any new pay plan that they've agreed to for next year. What you do see in there is a new pay scale for our non-represented. I'll cover that in a few slides. We have the mayor's proposed operating budget. That's a pretty thick book that gives you a lot of detail what's in the budget and summary schedules up front to show you a big picture. Then we have the mayor's proposed capital budget and capital improvement plan, which provides spending authority for this upcoming fiscal year and a plan for the 5 years after that. And then within the various budget documents, we'll be accumulating department presentations. And there's also been submitted central services legislation. As the city manager alluded to, we are proposing that we establish a new office, central services. I believe this was in place before I came on board. And when the city scaled back, they trimmed it down and kind of combined it with other departments. But we're seeing the effects of that, and we think it'd be much more efficiently managed if we had a central services office to take over some of our central services, such as procurement and the fleet management and the facilities management and any real estate needs we have. And Fred, I don't know if you want me to go all the way through or pause for questions. If you have a question during my presentation and it's the chair is all right with it, he'll call on you to.
Yes, I think it'd be more efficient if we take questions as you're going along, Jody. I
That's
see
usually
that,
best.
yeah, I see that Jim has his hand up. I'm not gonna be able to see everybody, so if you have a question, chime in.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question on the central services implementation of that department. I believe, if my memory serves me, that there was a central services department. At one point it was disbanded and now it's resurrected. And I'm not sure, but I believe Mike was city manager at the time it was in place previously. Is that right?
Correct.
So what led to its absorption into other departments that now we believe, now we believe it's necessary?
Well, I wasn't here when it was absorbed, but I
Okay.
think it was done more for budgetary, philosophical reasons, maybe. But what we're finding is we have very little support in those areas right now. For example, procurement is under the finance department, and the finance director has little to no time to provide the necessary guidance and support there, and it really is a drag on her efforts. Buildings, we have very little support and guidance on that. We have facility needs and office needs that are being unmet. We have an issue of a $500,000 a year lease on a building that we've been using for years that we want to try to address with space needs. And we just think it's a more efficient way to operate procurement, real estate, and the support and really more the support for vehicle replacement and related items. We're also looking at the possibility of our mail and other items. Right now, these things are diffused and spread all over and are kind of lumped in to departments and people that already have other responsibilities, and it's simply not working.
Thank you. So the creation of the department pulls from existing departments, but is there an increase in overall FTEs?
Yes. Yes.
What's the increase in FTEs?
There will be a director, and we're trying to figure out there is allowance within the budget to hire some expertise that we're discussing. We have issues with being able to purchase property or getting easements for bike and pedestrian right-of-ways. And so we're going to be looking at that as it goes along. Our preference right now, and the way that Jody structured it, is through funds available to hire outside consultants and otherwise. But there is a FTE for a director level position.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Jody, please proceed. Thank you.
So I just want to, I can add to that to say that I'm very much in favor of this. My background is not in procurement. It's a different kind of office. And I feel like that and these other things are not getting a lot of attention. DPW has a lot of work on their plate, and to try to manage the fleet and the facilities, I think that sometimes those things are lower priority, and we've had some issues trying to get attention to some of our facilities because of that.
And I mentioned one thing. This was something that was discussed and was one of the council's primary goals from our leadership and city council retreat. So it was fully vetted.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have our outlook for 2024 closing out, and these projections are based on projections we did in January. I'm going to update them pretty soon. I want to make sure that we're on target for what we're looking at for opening 25. We project $104.9 million of revenue, which is just a little under than what we have in the budget. We project expenditures, though, to be 104.9. That is $6 million under budget because we anticipate spending one-time sources, which we do, and even with the spending of the one-time sources, we're still $6 million under our total budget. We have a surplus then of the 5.9 million projected. A lot of it, again, is in the vacancies. Police, as you see, is providing a lot of that, $2.1 million of vacancies there. And fire had 1.9 million from vacancies. There was some extra budget in there for what they carry as excess positions for their training classes, and some changes to their benefit elections based on what we anticipate when we have vacancies. We project in the budget that they're going to take the high cost plan for family, and just to be on the conservative side, and not everybody does that. So with all those factors together there, we're projecting that they're going to be about 1.9 million total on their salaries and benefits under. So the good news coming into this next budget year, we do not have a property tax increase. It's going to remain at the 73.8 cents per $100 of assessed value. We have, we didn't use any ARPA funding for general fund this year. As you can see, our projections are good, so we're not going to need that for operating purposes. The assessed value of property and the other general fund revenues have stabilized the general fund. And so you were asking about the budget, the structural deficit. The revenues have been able to grow to cover the cost increases that we're seeing. So I don't know if you want to talk about that right now, but it's looking good for the general fund. And later on, we'll talk about some of the other funds. The general fund recurring revenue is going to increase by about 3.1 million over our 24 projections. And the growth in property tax is is driving that mainly, about 4.3 million. It's offset by a slight decreases in other revenue sources. The state income taxes are strong in 24, and we're projecting about 12.1 million in 25. I think that's about a 4 to 4.5% increase. Interest revenue is also expected to be strong again in 25. I keep waiting there to see if they're going to start cutting the interest rates. If they do that, that'll eventually get to our interest earning on our savings and our spare cash, or is earning in a money market, and it's in accordance with it goes up and down with the Fed's rate. So we're hoping that it stays. That's the only good thing about the high interest rates. It makes our interest income very strong. We as you know, 60% of our general fund revenues are from property taxes. And the end of the 24 year should bring a positive general fund balance. And we're going to be able to not only fill our required 15% reserve, but put some additional funding in our other 3 reserves: our budget stabilization, our capital reserve, and our one-time fund. Here's some revenue challenges. I talked a little bit just a minute ago about the potential downward fluctuation of interest rates. I do hear talk on the radio and some of the news stories about possibly cutting back on the interest rate, but so far there's no known plan to do that. So we're hoping that stays steady into the next year. Property tax abatements, as you know, if you live in Annapolis, property values went up significantly when we got them reassessed. And so we've tried to plan a significant estimate for abatements in this revenue estimate because, as you know, when your property tax bill goes up, there's a lot of people that go to dispute that with the state. And the state actually provided an estimate of abatements for us when they gave us our constant yield information. So we're using that, and I also have a little bit of an additional cushion there in case it's more than what they're estimating. City dock closure, we've worked into our revenue estimates for next year, potential decreases for dock charges, the boat show, and some tourism revenues such as occupancy taxes. We don't know when the dock is going to close and when they're going to start working on the construction there. As of right now, I believe we have to go through an environmental review from FEMA, and that could take up to a year. So we were always planning on having the boat show in the fall, but sometime next spring, this time we're hoping to be under construction there. So that closure may impact some of our revenue flow for these purposes. And we've tried to build that into the budget. As I said, occupancy taxes, we're being very conservative there. There were a lot of things that went into that one. We just passed a law just the other night that tries to close some loopholes and who can own a short-term rental in the city. So with that passing, and before that passed, we had a moratorium on new rentals. No new properties could register. So in that concern, we set the budget at a conservative estimate for next year. I'm hoping that will be higher than we have in the budget. But for right now, we're going to keep it conservative. And then we want the departments to continue to review their fees and fines. We had a couple of departments do a pretty good job of that this year and submit some increases to help fund the budget request. But we want to make sure they continue to review those to ensure that the fee levels are keeping pace with the cost of the service involved. So here I've got a breakdown of the general fund revenues, which shows you the actual for 23, what we're projecting for 24, and our proposed amounts for 25. You can see we've got a significant increase in the real property revenues. The charges for services is where you see we've done some conservative estimating on some of the dock charges. And then the strength of the intergovernmental revenues is coming mostly from the income taxes. I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of those. We can always come back to it if you do. With our revenue estimates for 25, we're in the first year of our 3-year assessment. The increase is approximately 4.4 million. The assessed value for the first 3 years had a gross increase of 8%. And as you know, that goes as 8% per year for the next 3 years. And a net the other credits and the reserve for abatements. When they sent us our property listing to help us estimate what we would collect, they also gave us the homestead numbers, and as you can imagine, they've jumped significantly. I think the numbers were 3.5 million of homestead caps in the previous year, and now it's up to around 20, I think it's around 25 million homestead caps, because it's capped at 10% growth, and a lot of the properties had significant growth in excess of 10%. I think if Jim has a question.
I'm sorry, can you refresh my memory on what intergovernmental makes up almost 20% of the proposed budget. What's the main components of intergovernmental again? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And I'll probably ask Katie to help me with this. The main component is the income taxes. We have admission taxes in there. If we, for 24, using a little bit of the ARPA funding from some of the council programs. So that was in there, 600,000. We won't get tax lines in there.
So the majority is transfers from the state. Is that accurate? I think she froze.
Yeah, Katie, are you able to step in while Jody to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I have to open up the book and I find it in my book.
Oh, sorry.
No, Jody, you're freezing occasionally though.
Yeah, again.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna try to drag my book over here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but you
Okay.
are freezing intermittently.
Do see that my system is not responding too, so I hope I don't. I have the budget book open, but I can't open it because it's not responding. So hopefully I don't.
Jody, I can answer that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Katie.
Intergovernmental is utility tax, hotel motel tax, emissions, income tax, and highway and fuel.
Thank you.
And Jim, if you want to, so you can find that on, I think it's page 21 of the budget book, operating budget book.
Oh, I haven't gotten that far.
22, I'm sorry. Yep.
Non-personnel. Oh, on the budget book, not the budget presentation. All right, thank you.
Yeah, there were a lot of materials that are included in your emails that you may want to look through that can give you a lot of breakdown of what's in here. But we'll be glad to look those up for you during the meeting as you have questions.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, I did not get to review the items sent last evening or this morning.
No, it was very late and I apologize. I told Katie it completely slipped my mind.
All right.
Monday after trying to get the book out.
Thank you for indulging me. Sorry to sidetrack.
All right. And you'll let me know if I'm cutting out. On the general fund expenditure by category here, you see the fluctuations in the expenditure categories. As always, the salary and benefits line is increasing. When you look at the actual in 23 compared to where we're at in 25, substantial increase. Our projected, we're about at 70 million in 24, 7.7 million in 25. We're a lot, some of that is a 5% increase in our healthcare premiums. So that's driving some of that, including increases to wages, which I'll address in a minute. Here's a graphical representation of the expenditures by type. And I do believe don't we have a, we have a pie chart in here of revenue somewhere, but either I put it in the wrong place or I accidentally took it out. So on the expenditure projections, the good news is that we have a 3.6% overall growth in the general fund, budget to budget. We have a 3.1% increase in recurring expenses. And with our revenue growth and our tightening of expenditures, it's allowing some new initiatives in departmental budgets. I believe that when you look at the budget for 25, you'll see that we've had some positive revenue trends, but we also have there was capacity in our expense budget, and we've made an effort to really trim down the capacity in the fire and police budgets to try to estimate based on what we think they're actually going to spend, increasing some of those turnover allocations, so that hopefully in 25 you won't see those underspending trends like we have. We're trying to get closer with the expense projections. On the challenge side of the expenditures, we still have some inflation and competition for job candidates. It's not just affecting my department. It's a lot of the departments are holding vacancies, having to run positions more than once to try to find a candidate. Very, very competitive market. And we had some temp in, and she took another job, and then we had somebody come in, we hired them, and then a few months later they went to another job. So it's really hard to hire and retain people. We have the study inflation. It's putting pressure on our non-personnel expenses. And I mentioned the healthcare premiums. They're going up 5% this year. That's both in the city cost and the employee contribution. We have held those steady for years. And each year we were seeing some excess building in our health insurance fund, and we're able to give that back to the employees in the city with our premium holidays. And each year that we've done that, the premium holiday has gotten smaller and smaller. And now we're at the point where we're going to need to increase the premiums to keep up with the increasing costs in healthcare. On the expenditure by department slide here, you see, again, the trends from 23 to 24 projected for the 25 proposed. So if you have any questions on those trends, we'll be glad to answer those. I don't know if there's no real standout here. The substantial increases, any increases in these are mostly driven by salary and benefits. There may be a few extra items within their budgets that is driving an increase. We'll go through some of the enhancements we put into their budgets in a minute. Here are the expenditure pie chart. Shows you the departmental division. Again, public safety, obviously. The police, fire, and OEM make up half the budget. Here is a table showing you the fund balances, what they were in 23, the 24 projected. As you see, even though we used a substantial amount during 23, in 24, we are projecting to add back to those, and so there's a projected add back, putting the reserves at about what they were previously. And in 25, when we project that, we do not presume that we're adding another layer. But after the uses that we have in the 25 budget, this is what we're projecting to have at the end of 25. And then I do this slide here to show you how we're going to replenish our fund balance.
Jody,
Mm-hmm,
can we go back to the last slide for a minute?
mm-hmm. Oops.
I must have been not listening well. What I see capital reserve and one-time uses have significant differences between 24 projected and 25 projected.
Right.
That's what makes up the reduction in the fund balance. Is there one or two or three major items or issues that cause the reduction?
Yeah, so each year we use those reserves, capital reserve and the one-time reserve. We use those for various projects, purposes. And then at the end of the year, if we have excess fund balance, we put money back into them. And for 23, that's the final audited balance. So that's after the new layer from 23 results is added back in. On 24, again, this projection is projecting that new layer that's added at the end of the year, because we're far enough through the year, we can see that we're probably going to have some excess to put back in. But with the 25, I'm only showing you, if we proceed with the 25 budget, that we are planning to use those reserves. And I'm not including in here any estimate for any new layer that we'll add at the end of 25, because our budget is set so that we will use those reserves, and that fund balance will, recurring revenues equals recurring expenses. So there would be no excess layer to add back. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. The 25 column doesn't include any new layers that might result at the end of 25.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right. So again, with the fund balance policy, we take the revenues from the general fund, the parking fund, and the transportation fund, and we are required to reserve fund balance in the amount of 15% of that total. And as you see, that amount is about $18.6 million. So at the end of 24, as of right now, we're projecting $22.6 million. Again, we showed you early about the savings that we're having on the spending side. So that will give us an extra $4 million, a little over $4 million, to put back into reserves. We put half of that into the capital reserve fund, and then the other half has to go into the budget stabilization fund, but only up to the amount of its cap. And after we add that $357,000, that cap will be reached. So the rest of that has to go down into a reserve for one-time costs. And these, there is a fund balance roll forward schedule in the operating budget book that shows you these numbers going back into the reserves. On our ARPA update, the ARPA funds have to be committed by December of this year. We've got, since we haven't had to use it to cover the general fund side, we've got other uses for it here. Our current balance, after adding the interest that's been earned on it over the past few years, a little over $7 million. And we're planning on using it this year. There were some council amendments, which I mentioned earlier, about $700,000 will be used for those. And in 25, there's a few things that we would like to use them. We want there's a new fireboat needed, and that's an expensive capital item. And we're also using some for some additional fleet purchases. We plan to put $1 million of it in a project for CNI, that's a Choice Neighborhoods Initiative. It's toward the Spa Road property. And I'll let somebody else speak to the whole nature of that project. It's the CNI program is a program run by the federal government to rebuild affordable housing areas. And in order to do that, the local government has to show that they are investing in the project as well. And our assistance on the Spa Road property and potentially providing the Spa Road property for development for some sort of mixed use workforce housing project it is in the plans. So this is going towards our contribution to that effort. We talked about city office space. We want to use some of this money for the office space project. Last summer, we had a space needs study done, which showed that what we know, we don't have enough space. We need to expand, and this is for the buildings that are downtown. We're in 3 historical buildings that were not initially built to house offices, and the fit out is awkward. The spaces are awkward and they're very small, and we've got need to spread out. And the study looked at a couple options. One is co-locating all of the offices, which would require a lot of square footage. And another option is getting a 4th building somewhere in the vicinity there and expanding a couple of the offices into the 4th building. So we're taking the first step on that and putting some funding in a capital project to try to make that work. And we've hired a real estate firm to help us try to locate some properties that might work for us and start discussing options. And then the last thing, as we were building the budget, we could see that next year, even considering the money that the parking fund will be sending to the transportation fund, they're still going to have a deficit there if our projections hold true for their budget. So we're going to apply almost $2 million of the ARPA funds to support transportation efforts. We can talk about that more in a minute. I do have another slide on the transportation fund. But it's going to be causing a problem. They're depleting their CARES money and their ARPA monies that they got through the Department of Transportation. And we've given them some of our monies also as well over the last couple of years. But we'll talk about their issues in a minute. This is just a slide of some of the workforce impacts in the budget. I mentioned before the union negotiations aren't completed, and we've developed a new pay scale for the non-represented group. That pay scale does not have any longevity holds and stretches out the scale to more steps and but lowers the amount of the annual increases on that scale. So we think it's a good idea for recruitment. If we, as it is, our current pay scale has you get up to the middle of the scale, and then you have to pause to get your next increase until you're there for a set number of years. And that makes it difficult to recruit people from the outside who already have several years of experience, and we bring them in further up on the scale, and then they have to sit in the longevity step for several years, which makes it difficult to bring people in-house. We have a new executive pay range for the city manager and the direct reports. And I will say that these pay scales that we're developing are a result of the class and comp study that HR has been working on with an outside vendor for quite a few months. And our pay scales are trying to make sure that we're in a line or slightly better than market on the midpoint. And keeping that midpoint aligned with market is important. And then recommended that the executives and even the non-reps, they feel could go into a pay range and not a pay step scale. So we're setting a pay range for the direct reports to the city manager, and there's 3 executive levels of leadership, and those are only those that report directly to the city manager. Jim has a question.
Thanks. What do you define as market?
So that their market, the firm that's doing the study has gone out into the market, which is mostly other governments, and what they're paying their people in the same roles. Sometimes, like with the finance, they may go look at other finance roles. We do have a list in the report. It's not finalized, but they give us a list of the jurisdictions they looked at to get their comparators to see if we're aligned with them, and how, and that also looks at how their those other jurisdictions are paying people and how they move them through a scale and what their payrolls are. And the report will have a lot of other recommendations in it, but this market study is what we asked for first, so that we could try to work out a pay scale that represents market. And so we don't have to discuss adjusting the scale for both a COLA and merits every year, but it's just a scale that you move through that includes both COLA and merit.
Thanks. Does it include cost of living factors, like comparing Annapolis to, say, Charleston, South Carolina? Just as I don't just.
Yeah, so the market that they studied was in the region and close by governments. They didn't try to go to other areas to try to find market comparators. And I don't know how they looked at cost of living. They made some recommendations around cost of living based on the entry level pay wages and what they're calling a living wage. And so we use those in some of our thoughts, but not exactly, because we knew that Annapolis, for instance, is a little less expensive than Washington, D.C. So we were trying to take that into consideration when deciding where do we start the steps at, how close do we have to get to that living wage. And we've made a couple of good steps forward there.
Thanks very much.
When we implement this new pay scale for non-represented, we're going to provide bonuses, but only when you go to a new scale and everybody's in the same grade, and they're going to jump onto the new scale at a step in the scale that is at least what they're making or the next value up. And when you do that, because of the calculations, some people would be getting a significant jump when they go onto the new scale, and some people would not be getting a very large increase. So we're trying to reduce that inequity by providing a differential bonus to those, so that all employees that jump onto the new scale get at least a 2.5% increase on July 1. And it's in a bonus, and it doesn't roll into their permanent pay. I don't know if anybody has any questions with that. So we have a reserve in the budget for potential reclasses. As I said, this class and comp study is not complete. And one of the things it's looking at is the grading of our positions throughout the city. And we'll end up making a few recommendations on changing the grades of some of the positions. We don't have that information yet, so we've put a reserve in the general fund for that. We don't know if it's how much it's going to be. Think, Katie, what did we end up with? 250,000?
No, a little under 200,000.
Okay, like 190 or something. Not knowing what it's going to be, we don't know if that's too much or too little, so we'll have to wait and see there. We're converting some positions in harbor master and the police to the civil service because they've been with us for 5 years and it's time to convert them. Recreation Parks has a conversion. Human Resources is upgrading its office associate 1 to an office associate 3, only because that's the only position that we had in the lower levels of the scale that had to be upgraded in order to attract somebody inside because it's a very low salary job. Planning and zoning is getting funding for an assistant chief of preservation. We're moving if you recall, a couple of years ago, I got a grants administrator approved in my budget. We're moving that to Public Works to help with some of their capital budget grant request activity. Harbor Master is getting some additional funding for seasonal salaries, and we're adding some funding for seasonal salaries at some of the Rec and Parks locations. This is just a list of some of the positions we're adding in the 2025 budget. We don't have to go all over these in details, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Planning and zoning has asked for a couple of new positions. HR is getting 1, and then Rec and Parks wanted some new recreation leaders. We funded 2 of those, and a maintenance worker for the parks crew. The central services director is listed here. We spoke about that earlier. The mayor's office is going to reinstate the Hispanic liaison position, and we're asking for a new budget analyst in finance to help Katie and Capri. And then the enterprise funds have asked for a few new positions, and a lot of those are split across several of the enterprise funds. And as you know, the fees come from they're paid for by the utility fees. When we were kind of summarizing things, and we wanted to put a slide in, we got a couple slides in here for public safety departments to show specifically. You don't see a lot of mention in here about FY25 police items, but we've done a lot for them in 24. So we added that slide here to show what we've done for the police department in 24, and then a couple of the things that we've done for them in 25.
Jody, just a quick question. Are all these new positions as a result of enhancement requests from the respective departments?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was there any change this year in the enhancement request process from prior years?
I don't think so. Everybody submits their baseline budget and enters that into our OpenGov product, and then they create enhancement requests for each new thing they want to do. And we collect those, and then while we're going over the requests and trying to pull the numbers together, we start looking through the enhancements and figure out which ones we want to and can honor.
Okay, thank you.
So here's a few of the things that that are in the fire department. They're going to replace some equipment, some gym equipment. We've given them some funding for those, converting a couple of captains to battalion chiefs, and they're trying to get another SAFER grant, which will add 4 personnel to staff a peak time medic unit. OEM, we've given them some additional overtime funds, some additional funding for the Food Fridays program. We're funding their substance use disorder program, and some additional funding for their telephones. The non-personnel enhancements are summarized here pretty quickly. I won't go over all these in detail. DPW has asked for a camera truck and a water valve truck, so those are in the budget. Internal service funds, I'll pause here for a minute. The self-insurance in FY23 shows a deficit. And that's because we looked at all of our cases that are out there. We've got a few general liability claims that are either have high estimates for settlement, but more often our attorney is confident that we'll be successful, but the cost of defending the claims is very excessive. So we went through all of the claims with a careful eye, and they adjusted the reserves upward. And then the actuary redid their actuarial estimates for next year, and our contribution went up by 1.35 million. That won't completely get rid of the deficit that's there. If we think we're going to have some extra one-time funds available this year, I have considered asking council to put some one-time funds over there to boost that reserve this year, along with the extra contribution that we'll do in 25. And then we'll see at the end of 25 where we're at with that fund. On the health insurance side, it's a $12.9 million budget with a 5% increase. We've talked about that. Fleet replacement fund, their budget's 4.8 million, and that's where we put the appropriation for the fireboat and additional vehicle purchases that we spoke about earlier. The fleet operations fund budget's 2.7, nothing significant there. On the pension cost, the contribution went from 34.25% of salaries this year to 34.82% of salaries. That's pretty good, considering some of the increases we've seen in prior years. It's costing us an extra $154,000 in 25 compared to 24. And we are, as always, fully funding what the actuary recommends as a % of the salaries. On the state pension side, their contribution rate went from 11.32 to 11.97. It's costing us $104,000 in the general fund, and citywide, it's costing us about $144,000 to fund that. On the parking and transportation revenues, I've shown you the trends here. The only thing that comes to note is this 24 projection for the parking fund. That when closed out the P3 deal and we refunded the debt, and also when the garage construction as those reserves liquidated, we got some substantial cash infusion back, and that there with that $10.9 million. The proposed, and you see the more normal level in 25, which we project to be about 9.1 million. On the, I wanted to talk a little bit about the parking fund impacts. In our waterfall payment, we've gotten one. We got that in January for the first 6 months, 24, higher than we had anticipated. And I pulled these statistics out of a report that came from a partner. By $100,000 and $200,000 respectively. The cash flow that was projected, the model that given a bar chart here. With the revenues in blue and the expenses in orange, and the trends over the years.
I think it may help, Jody, your system resources. If you turn off your camera, you're intermittently cutting out.
I think she had mentioned earlier that she had the budget book open. You might want to close the budget book because I'm sure that's a resource.
Okay, I think I'm back on now. I don't know if it was my internet connection or what. Katie let me know I was freezing, so I stopped talking. Can you hear me? You can?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because some of you are freezing too, so I hope I don't go out again.
Jody,
it?
it might help if you turn off your camera.
Turn off my camera. Okay. Oh, good. Now I gotta find that. It's up here somewhere. Oh, hold on. Okay, and you can still see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Now you don't need to see me. All right, so there you see the parking fund activity on the revenue and expenses, and this is where you see what I was talking about as far as getting some of those trust accounts liquidated at the close of the construction project. Transportation fund impact in 24, the transportation fund plans to use its remaining transportation ARPA. And in 24, the parking fund is sending them 1.4 million in 25. The city, as I mentioned earlier, we're giving them almost $2 million of ARPA. And in 25, parking is going to be able to send them about 2.6 million in subsidy. And this is what I want to talk about in the transportation fund. In 26, there's going to be a structural deficit in that fund because all these federal supplements will be depleted. The problem with the transportation is that the state funding that they've used for operations has remained flat for last many, many years. And we're not getting any kind of inflationary increase on those contributions. So we're having every year, the city is having to pick up the difference. And we fortunately had some of these other resources to use. But yeah, those are all being used now, and we're going to have to figure out another solution for transportation, whether it's in the form of a city tax increase or we can try to work with the state to get either more grant revenues or some other contribution from the state or the local government, the county government, to help us maybe raise some of our rates, our fare rates, although I don't know that that's going to produce a significant amount of revenue. So we've got a challenge ahead of us for 26. Does anybody have any questions there? Patrick?
Back a little on your previous screens, you were talking about the pensions. And I was just curious, you talked about the city pension, but then you also gave figures for state pensions. I'm just curious how that,
Okay,
do we
so
also, people
the
pay
city
into the
pension,
state?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Say that
They
again.
also pay into the state somehow?
Yeah, so our city pension is only for police and fire employees, police and fire uniformed employees. They're eligible to participate in our police and fire plan. And the rest of the employees, the rest of the civil service employees and the exempt full-time employees are in the state pension plan. So we actually participate in 2 different plans, but no one person is in both of them.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a slide here on the DPW enterprise fees. I didn't want to give you too much detail on these budgets unless you look at them and you have some questions for us. Here, we're just providing what the rates, how the usage rates are going up by in each fund. 3% in sewer, 4.75% in water. The water restoration is going up by 15%. Solid waste up by 10%. This is having an impact on your quarterly bill that will go up about 7%. That's an average for 10,000 gallons. These are all determined by a study that we have done by Stantec, our consultant, who takes into consideration our fund balances, our operating needs, our capital needs for the next few years in detail. And we have several meetings with them about what they need to spend and work through a model with them as to what the rate needs to be in order to maintain a healthy reserve at a certain target balance. I know that Stantec is planning on coming to the Finance Committee to do a presentation to talk about those studies. In 2025, we just provided a slide here with our top of the projects that got the most funding. I think the threshold was $5 million funding. I put those on here, or actually maybe a little bit less, 4 million.
Jody, did you want me to talk about this? Sorry, I had stepped out. for
Oh,
a second.
yeah. Well, yeah, you can just go through some of the projects here and what they're doing with the funding, if you will.
Sure. City Dock, Resilience and Revitalization. I'm sure everyone knows about that one. For those of you that don't, it's a multifaceted project that will revitalize the City Dock area while also enhancing resilience by eliminating tidal flooding and protecting against flooding caused by tropical storms and hurricanes. We have 18 million programmed in 25, 17.5 of that is grants. West East Express Bikeway, we have 5.4 programmed this year, 4.7 of that is grants. And that is to really connect downtown Annapolis to Parole along the former WB&A Railroad corridor. Connecting communities, $4 million this year. It's split between grants and bonds. This project has several components to create a more cohesive on-street and off-street trail system in the city, as recommended in the Annapolis Bicycle Master Plan in 2011. Water distribution rehabilitation, that's 4.9. That's a reoccurring, we fund that project every year. It really addresses the repair and maintenance of the existing water distribution grid. The College Creek Connector Trail, that's 3.1 million program this year. 3 million of that is grants. And the College Creek Connector Trail connects King George Street to Calvert Street along the shoreline of College Creek.
Okay. So this is the summary here. My takeaways for 25 in the future. We've talked about the financial stability. We've managed to get through that period without having a structural deficit in the general fund, so that's very good news. And that's a result of our budgeting efforts and our strong fund balance reserves. We are going to need to fund that deficit in the self-insurance fund, which I spoke of earlier. Any ARPA funding will not be available beyond 2025. So we have to work to get that committed this year. We do have a lot of significant amount of grants coming in, most of them for capital projects, and some of them are newer projects, initiatives by the mayor to do some of his visionary projects for making it more connectable and sustainable community. And we're getting a lot of grants in, and it's going to be a task to manage those grants. So I see that as one of our important challenges. And we talked about the transportation revenue. We have to figure out how we want to move ahead and work with some of our surrounding jurisdictions to see if we can get some additional revenue from them. The second year of our assessed value increases will come in 26. And, FY26 will be the last budget that Mayor Buckley puts forth. So we got one more budget with Gavin, and then we'll have a new mayor in place. So those are some of our forward-looking issues. Here's a slide on the budget timeline. This, except for the May 13th meeting, this is when your report is due to the city council, so that's important for you. And here's some departmental budget reviews which you may want to note. in case you want to observe some of these meetings. The most important for you would be April 24th, where we're going to be talking about debt affordability, the enterprise funds, and then on April 25th, we're going to be talking about the capital budget. So FAC members may want to attend or watch those meetings and to see what we're doing as far as debt affordability is concerned. Mike, I don't know if you want to close with anything here. I also have the debt affordability report. I don't know if you wanted to take a look at that now or not, Mr. Chairman.
Jody, I don't have anything to add other than, I appreciate that, Katie outlined some of the big capital goals that are in the budget, and that's about it for me.
Jody, I think it might be helpful to have a brief presentation on the debt affordability materials from Davenport.
Okay, let me see if I can share. This will take me a minute here. I gotta share another.
Jody, while you're doing that, Mr. Sussman, on the 25th on our internal budget calendar, I have a 3 p.m. city council work session with the FAC. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but we're supposed to go over debt affordability and CIP.
What time is that? 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock, yes.
Is that what is reflected on some papers as a joint meeting between the Finance Committee and FAC, or the Council and FAC?
Sorry, I was on mute. I believe so, but I'll verify for you.
I stopped sharing and I'm gonna try to reshare something else because. All right.
Is that meeting available via Zoom and in person, or just in person?
I will verify that for you as well.
Okay. Hopefully you
Thank
can
you.
now see. Can you see the debt capacity update on the screen? Okay, I
Yes.
did that right. I'm getting better at this. All right, so this is Davenport's report, and I'll just flip through the pages pretty quickly. This first one is, our debt service calculation that we follow most closely is the percent of general fund revenues. So the first thing they're doing here is looking at the projected, the 25 general fund expenditures of 114,890. And then they project a 1% increase annually thereafter, and they compare that to the debt service cost. And the two components of debt service cost there are the existing debt service and new debt service. And so those total debt service costs are compared to the general fund expenditures, and then they calculate the percent of general fund expenditures that we're using for debt service. So this is what that first column does. And then this second graph helps to see our target is 10%. And in the 1 year, we do see the projected debt service expenses going over that amount. Our cap is 12%. So we are nowhere near the 12%. And as you know, in past years, we've had times when we saw a bar approach or slightly go over that 10% line, but we do not usually get there. As this graph and the calculation assumes that all prior approved debt service that has not yet been sold in the form of bonds, as we know projects kind of lag behind, those bonds are sold in the next 2 years, and that the proposed CIP program, all the bonds are sold annually in accordance with the program. And the projects almost never stay on track. They are always lagging. So you'll see a delay in that, which is why we've never gotten to the 10% threshold. So this portrayal here doesn't look too bad. And I doubt in 2028 that we'll get to that 10% bar, and consider that measurement of 10% is using an expense increase year over year of 1%, which is very conservative. We almost always increase the growth of the expenditures more than that. So I'm feeling confident this is a super conservative projection of where we would be on that score. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point. I do to show that if we were trying to stay within the 10% target, this first set is saying how much we'd be able to issue in those years and still stay within that 10% target. If we were willing to go to the 11%, there's some capacity for some other borrowing here. And then the 12%, we have some capacity there as well. Not that we would ever attempt to fill all that capacity, but that just shows you where we have some room in the plan. And this just outlines the CIP numbers that show you where they're getting their estimates on what kind of debt we would issue over time. Oh, okay, so hold on. I'm sorry. So this one here is the capacity without 20-year
New borrow.
amortization.
Without new borrowing.
Yeah, without any new borrowing. Thank you, Jim. And then this is the one which shows if we go ahead with our CIP plan, this is the capacity.
Quick question there, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
This assumption of 5% issuance, how does that compare to the city's current portfolio?
We're all lower than 5% right now. The most costly that we've done was the most recent one. We haven't done a debt sale in the last year because we're still sitting on some proceeds from the sale from December of 22. So we haven't issued any more. We may issue some in the fall, but depending on what happens with City Dock, there may be some excess proceeds there. If that doesn't move forward as quickly as we want to, we may reprogram some of those proceeds to our other projects and not sell any new debt this fall. So that's still yet to be seen. What I'm leading up to is I don't know if we might hit that 5% point at some time. If the interest rates stay high, I haven't been involved in any local government bond sales recently, so I don't know what their effective rate is on their bonds. But all of our current debt is below the 5% mark. Did that answer your question?
You're muted, Jim.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, so right now we have some low interest rates on our debt, but selling today would probably be a little bit more expensive. I don't know if we get to 5%, but we might. So that's all that I have to share today. There were a lot of materials that went to you if you want to take a look in more detail at the operating budget, the capital budget, this debt capacity review, and then send questions to me. I'm glad to answer. And then Fred, I don't know what your plans are for meeting and deliberating and what the next few weeks holds.
Yeah, we need to discuss that. Jody, is the time frame this year more condensed than normal than in past years?
No, not really. In fact, the first meeting, the meeting that we presented the budget actually might have been earlier because it was the second Monday, but it was only the 8th day of the month. So we were a little bit earlier there. But the time frame is the same, and Katie can probably address whether or not there's been any compaction. The 2 weeks following the presentation, for the next 2 weeks, we'll be doing finance committee meetings with the departments. And then there's some and then they start to pull the information together. They get comments from you. The finance committee pulls together their report. And then all that goes to council and the council starts preparing amendments. And there's one of those last slides that I had on the slideshow, there was a timeline for some of those dates.
Okay, and the 25th, that's the
Thursday, yeah, Thursday, I think it's the 25th.
Yeah, 3:00.
Yeah. And that, I believe that's gonna be televised. I think Madeline could probably speak to that.
The budget meetings?
Yeah, the work session on the 25th of April.
Yes, they're all televised, or you can find them live streamed on the city's Facebook or YouTube.
All right.
Or-
But that's one of those meetings, that's one of the meetings that we appreciate the attendance of the facts, so it could help. It may be something, you may want to ask questions about debt affordability. The capital presentation is also an important one.
Is that just for viewing or is that for participation as well?
So on the finance committee, okay, hold on just a second. I think the CIP was on the 24th, Katie, is that right?
So I think debt affordability, so Davenport, Stantec are the 24th, and then the 25th is the CIP presentation.
Oh, okay, I had them backwards then, I'm sorry. So Madeline, these are finance committee presentations. So, and I said it was a work session on the 25th. Is it a work session on the 25th, Katie? Or just the finance committee in the morning?
Believe it's both, but let me verify. Sorry, I just
Okay.
closed it.
I do currently have a finance budget hearing in the morning and a city council work session on like our calendar for the 25th. And both of those would be broadcast and live streamed.
Okay, so what are the opportunities for members of the FAC then to ask questions if they were remote?
Questions about remote will have to go through, there's a new process in place. Yeah, Vicky.
Yeah, I can answer. I can answer that question. So that's really up to council. So if council desires to have you there to present or weigh in or whatever, that's their prerogative because it's their meeting. They would need to request that. And if they request that, then you know, that then we can respond. But it's their prerogative because it's their meeting.
Isn't this supposed to be a joint meeting though?
For
Which one?
On 20, I'm getting confused. I really apologize. I thought that somewhere that I was reading the 25th is a joint meeting between the city council and the FAC. Am I missing something?
So I don't know. Well, right now I closed that slide, so I don't have my PowerPoint open. Hold on a minute. If it is a joint meeting and it's an in-person meeting, they would want you there, or they'd have to figure out how you can participate remotely. The finance committee and the work sessions are all in person now. So if you desire to come to a combined meeting, and I do believe there is a combined meeting, but again.
Jody,
Well,
I can answer. I'm on the city's website, okay? And it says on the 25th, this will be a joint meeting with the FAC. So it's going to go over capital improvement projects, debt affordability, and other budget related items.
What
Is
time?
that a work session, the 3 o'clock, or is that the
Special work session, 3 o'clock.
okay.
That's what I see in the memo on page 6.
Right, that was my recollection.
Yeah, so then we have the issue of are you able to come to it physically, or do you want to, Vicky, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the preference is to have you in person because it is an in-person meeting. If you're not able to attend, then, and it's a joint meeting, so in some sense you both have some amount of ownership over it. Fred, as the chair of FAC, can request remote participation, or a council member can request remote participation. We ask that that be 48 hours or more in advance. For normal, yeah. So.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing, it sounds like that of all these meetings that are gonna be going on, the one on the 25th at 3 o'clock, joint meeting with the city council, is probably the most important one for FAC members to try and attend. Is that correct?
Correct. And then in person makes it a lot easier, especially when you're asking questions and getting answers. That in person is easier to determine who has a question and who's first.
Okay. And when is the FAC's report to the city council due?
I saw it on the deadlines. Was that May 13th, Katie? It was on that, somebody's
Yes, May
nodding.
13th. Yes, it's me, May 13. FAC submit their comments to the city council on the proposed CIP.
Okay. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is May 9th, and that would not give us enough time to deliberate and then prepare a report, have it approved, et cetera, for the 13th. So it seems like we're gonna need to have a special meeting of the FAC sometime between the 25th, probably the following week. Oh boy. Just bear with me while I try and find the calendar. I got two monitors open, but I can't get to my office monitor without losing something here. So let me go on my phone and try and check my calendar on my phone. Okay. How about the 30th? Or the 2nd? Do either of those work or not work for FAC members and Jody and staff?
So if you,
May-
if you want me there, I can do afternoons except for Thursday. There's another work session. I don't know which one that is. If it's a topic I don't have to be there for, then I'm probably good any afternoon, but the mornings, I've got finance committee possible meetings set up those days.
Fred, I could do the 30th. May 2, I could only do if we wrap up by 9. So May 2 looks like a no. The Thursday, May 2 is a no.
How about Tuesday, the 30th?
That's better.
How about other FAC members?
Sorry, I lost connectivity. You said the 30th in the morning?
Jody, you said you can't do the morning?
Well, the finance committee meetings that are penciled into my calendar are 9:30 starts. So if you did it earlier and I was done by 9:30, I'd be okay.
Okay. How about the 30th at our usual 7 o'clock time. I mean,
Eight.
yeah, 7 o'clock time.
Not 7.
8
Yes,
o'clock,
I'd be available on the 30th at 8 a.m.
and we'll try and move it along.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from PAC members? So we got the 25th at 3 o'clock in person or remote. And I will put in a request for remote participation, but in-person attendance is preferred. We'll have a special meeting on the 30th at 8 a.m. and our next regular meeting will be May 9th at 8 a.m. May 9th at 8 a.m. Any other comments or questions? Jody, thank you very, very much for the presentation. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
If not, entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Jim Cardillo.
Motion.
Patrick, did I see your hand up? Yeah, seconded by Patrick. All in favor of adjourning, signify by raising your right hand.
Aye.
I think we've had enough. And thank you very, very much. Everybody have a great day. Jim?